We gotta go to the bullpen. Welcome to the Highland Bullpen, the all-new podcast bringing America's pastime to Scotland's shores. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Famer heading for Cooperstown or you're fresh out of the minor leagues. This is the podcast for you.
Hi everyone. On today's podcast we've got Cammy Bell of the Rangers Football Club podcast Heart in Hand. Heart in Hand's a podcast for Rangers fans that's been going for around 10 years. It's been in the top 20 in the BPA Podcast Awards in the last couple of years and features in the top 100 podcast on Patreon. A successful project with 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers. Great opportunity for us today to chat to Cammy. He'll talk us through some of how the podcast has been set up, some of the achievements the podcast has done, and specifically we're also going to talk about some of Cammy's groundhopping experiences following Rangers. We hope that all football fans and actually fans of sport and travel will enjoy it as well. So over to the guys, having a chat with Cammy. All right, Cammy.
Hiya guys, how are we? All good.
Sorry, Cammy, we're currently playing a wee game. But Richard had asked Alan and I about because we covered a lot of American sports as well. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you.
Richard had asked us the 8 Americans that have played for Rangers. But I just remembered Bedoya.
Edu, obviously. Bedoya, Bocanegra. Who else?
We've got 2 left.
Who have you got so far?
Beasley, Bocanegra.
Yep.
Polster, of course.
Polster's wife.
Polster's wife. She counts as 3.
Claudio Reyna.
Claudio Reyna, yep.
Yeah, and the other ones you got, guys, I think you got...
That's the 6, I think, that we've got, is it?
Yeah, right. So the 2, both midfielders, both central midfielders, played for Rangers in the last 5 to 6 years, but each of them only played for 4 or 5 months, or slightly longer in that one case, but midfielders. One of them arrived via Arsenal.
The trialist.
Yeah, young lad.
Slim boy.
Took a penalty. Did he not score a penalty?
Zalalem.
Yeah, well done. Yeah. So just one left. I think this guy was quite
Did he not score a penalty in the League Cup semi-final against Celtic?
That was Zalalem scored his.
So one more left. This guy also came via an English top-flight club, scored 4 times for Rangers in 17 games. I think it was fairly well thought of at the time. I'd say a goal-scoring midfielder. 4 and 17 might not sound like it, but it was a goal threat from midfield.
When was it, Richard?
It was 2017. So 2016-17 season from January 2017. Final clue in for this guy here. His first name was also the name of a former Rangers player who came from South America and also played for Middlesbrough.
Hyndman.
Yeah, Emerson Hyndman, yeah.
Yeah, nice. That was a pretty good goal, guys. I thought a couple of them are pretty obscure-ish, I would have said. So that was a good start.
Cammy, that had absolutely nothing to do with the chat tonight. It's just
no, but do you know what's ironic is because we had Hill up for a live show in the Loudon. One of the things I love about that Clint Hill goal is see if you watch it again and go back and watch it, right? And apart from the ball girl behind the goal, right, which everybody remembers, is see if you watch Hyndman. Hyndman runs off and celebrates as if he scored the goal. Genuinely go back and watch it. He really does. He goes off as if he's the one that's scored it. Out
of that American contingent, then, Cammy, do you have a favourite player? Any of those bring back particularly good memories for you?
It's tough not to pick Mo Edu in it because of the last minute winner and DeMarcus Beasley, obviously some of the European goals as well, do you know what I mean? But I always liked Bocanegra. I don't know if he really got a fair crack at it, but I always liked Bocanegra, and he was a big profile player as well, you know.
I was going to say Claudio Reyna. Actually, I was a little bit surprised Reyna didn't make it into your top 3 there. Cammy, I always thought that was a particularly strong team and squad he was part of.
Yeah, he was.
He was still a good player within that.
Bocanegra set up, you see, quite a good partnership with Big Godin, big Romanian boy, Daniel. Was it Daniel Godin? He set up a really good partnership at the heart of the defence that year. I'm sure.
You mean in business partnership?
Construction firm. It's going great.
opened up a vineyard.
So is it a nice change then for you, Cammy, being on this end of a podcast then? Is that a nice little departure?
It's good, yeah, it's good. It's weird. I know it sounds daft, but it's weird doing it on video as well, because almost all of our stuff is pretty exclusively done on Skype. We said on Heart and Hand on Hoggy's Hamper on Friday that we would do we're going to do like a live hamper, which we'll do via Zoom. It was weird because when Ian and I talked about it, we we're kind of like, don't know how it'll be like with us actually on camera. So we're kind of working out the permutations of that. So we're looking forward to it. So this is kind of good practice to kind of get into.
And I noticed you kicked off in 2010. So if you were a footballer, you'd be due a testimonial around about now, for 10 years.
Let me tell you, when you have to have the daily management of David Edgar, you should get a testimonial about every 6 months dealing with that guy. Because I'll give you a small indicator to what I have to deal with, like I say, on a hour-by-hour basis. Is David and I were recording the daily update one day on a Friday. We were kind of chatting through it and stuff, and then we had the live show at Ibrox that night. So typically whenever we do live shows for about 7:30, 8 o'clock kickoff, we kind of have to be there for about the back end of 6 o'clock so we can get in and get set up. We've got to bring the PA guy in and all that. Like Rangers, literally, they outsource it to a catering company, and they basically just leave you to your own devices. They give you like zero assistance for setup and stuff. The bar staff are brilliant and they give you security, but you're still running the show. So David and I are kind of wrapping up and we're like, oh yeah, blah, 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 chap. And then we finished recording and I'm like, right, well, listen, I'll see you later on tonight. He goes, hey, what's tonight? The live show at Ibrox that we're all doing? Oh, I suppose I better go and get a shower and jump the train. Genuinely, I think he would have forgotten about the whole thing. That's what I'm dealing with.
And of course, Heart and Hand's been an incredible success story, even among podcasts then, Cammy, as well. It's a huge audience you've got, and you seem to have hit upon just a winning formula.
Yeah, we when we started out initially, what we kind of wanted to look at was, as you guys will know, and you know, having kind of been to games and stuff, is what we kind of realised was that there was an opportunity for us to firstly talk a lot about the kind of dialogue that we wanted to hear, so that we didn't want to, and we've never tried to put like a biased viewpoint in. We can talk about things with like Rangers tinted specs on, of course, but by and large, as you all know, a lot of the mainstream media was pretty negative, or there was a preset agenda, or there was something along the back of that. And really what we wanted to do was start to challenge that norm, which was going to be problematic because you were just wee guys talking in somebody's kitchen. But fortunately, we had enough about us that we started to gain some traction. And our big thing, even all the way through from doing the free shows early on and then get into the Patreon site, is once people hear us, they tend to stay. Like they'll hear what we're talking about, and we kind of open up a little bit of a kind of different dynamic for them. And once they hear it, by and large, they generally agree with it. We're very fortunate about the fact that we've got a really broad range of podcasters with us now, who again will come at it from different viewpoints and stuff. And it's kind of like how you'd all stand and talk in the pub, and people will have their different viewpoints, and I'm right and you're wrong and all the rest of it, and we can get some good debate going. But by and large, what we're trying to do is recreate what you would maybe talk about with your pals. That's it. That's all that has to happen.
Yeah, I've found it quite interesting, the range of stuff you've got on there. I mean, most of my listening is probably the daily updates, particularly when there's something going on you want to hear. But if you look, you've got TV shows, you've got politics, travel, all sorts of stuff going on there as well. So how did that develop?
So we spoke a lot around in the kind of early days when it was like myself, David, Scott, Ian, and a kind of couple of the staple guys that we probably had involved in terms of the flagship. And when we started to kind of talk about doing Heart and Hand Extra, the other show kind of towards the tail end of the week, was we wanted to attract people to come in to see if you've got an idea for a show, if you've got some sort of theme that you want to be able to try and do. So already we had a kind of nucleus of guys that we could involve within that. But then at the same point, we've started to attract people to come in. So people literally would message you or email you or whatever and say, look, I've got an idea for a show. What do you think? And sometimes what they do is they would say, well, I've got an idea for a show, but I want you to do it. And then we would say to them, well, why don't you do it yourself? It was introducing people to the world of podcasting and doing all that kind of stuff. If you guys have heard some of the most recent stuff with guys like John Cowden and Alan Bradley, with the best will in the world to those guys, they're probably our kind of more senior podcasters. These guys would never, like Alan's daughter can't believe he does a podcast, and she tells all her pals about it and stuff. But the big thing with that is we wanted to empower these guys to come on and talk about this kind of stuff, because if you feel really passionately about it, you'll be the best salesperson for that theme, that show, how it goes. What we try and do is we try and almost incubate it slightly by saying, right, so your idea is good with this, change it to this, or how do you think it will go? We'll do pilots, and fundamentally the listeners are the are the base. If they like it and they want to hear more of it, they'll tell us. And some shows have went really well and blossomed, and other ones have kind of ran a bit of their natural course, and those guys might move on to other projects. So, like I say, it's all about being able to try and build that as a community of listeners, but also as podders as well.
I like that you see the word community there as well, Cammy. That's what struck me, that you started off maybe talking about Rangers directly, Rangers of the present day, Rangers of the past. But as you say now, it's almost a wider community. Rangers is still that single thing that joins everyone together, but you've got a really diverse range of subjects and interests covered.
I think the big thing for us is, I mean, I've been involved in kind of fan activism for 20 years when I was doing things with things like the guys in the Blue Order, the Club Deck Loyal and stuff. And what I found is that you could have very different viewpoints on religion, social class, cultural class, politics, whatever, but Rangers is the thing that unites you. It's the glue that brings you together. And what I tend to find, although Rangers fans can be somewhat argumentative a little bit with each other, because we've all got opinions and we all love the club and we want to see the club move forward, and I'm right and you're wrong and all that kind of stuff. Fundamentally, what we want to see is a club blossom. We want to see the club succeed. We want to see a growth with it. So the big thing for us, especially when talking about how to make a show or a pod or whatever in terms of the network, is be diverse. And you'll appeal to some people in terms of that community, and other people will probably take or leave what you're saying and all that kind of stuff. The big thing that we're incredibly lucky with, as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about our community, is that because we do have a good range of podders, a good range of viewpoints, people will have favourites. People will have people that they enjoy listening to. I totally get that. But they won't be critical or dismissive of other podders who are giving up their time to be able to try and do it. There's one guy who does this full time, and that's David. Everyone else, it's voluntary. Tonight, for example, as we're recording this, our preview boys, because of their own schedules, they won't start recording this until 11 o'clock UK time. So they're up until the back end of 1, recording and then sending that so that we can put that out for tomorrow. So we're very, very fortunate that we've got a lot of people who put an effort into that, and I think the listeners reciprocate to that. I think they're very appreciative of it.
Can you hint at the size and scale of the operation and the success that it's become as well? Cammy, do you have a favourite moment, a favourite show, a favourite interview over your time with Heart and Hand that you'd look back on and think just that was terrific?
It's kind of weird because I think of the pod as my child, and I'm incredibly protective of it. You guys will feel the same about this and stuff as well, I'm sure, and the fact that, you know, you want to make sure that you make it the best it can be and stuff. To give you an idea with it, like probably more recently, and the fact that, I mean, as you guys will know with what's happened with the board and, you know, the various changes that have happened, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, having the working relationship with the clubs has been really, really important. A couple for me that probably stand out is when we sponsored the game against St Mirren, beginning of the season, last season. You know, every so often, and you've all watched it, right? So you'll know that every so often the match sponsor will come up and, you know, if it's Tom or in this case it was Clive Tildesley on comms, we'll talk about it, and Kevin Thompson was doing the co-comms, and I'm kind of sitting there buzzing with pride seeing our logo on an actual Rangers game. And then Kevin Thompson turned around and he said, the boys are all absolutely brilliant, you know, I know them all really well and stuff. And he goes, I've been a guest. And Clive Tildesley turned around and said, you know, I've been on it as well. They're all good guys. And it's a bit surreal because you're like, is that our podcast they're actually talking about, or is this somebody else? And then we had one, and it was not long after we'd just done the 50 greatest Rangers, and it had went to a shot of Neil McCann at the halftime punditry, and it came up, Neil McCann recently voted in Heart and Hand's 50 greatest Rangers. And genuinely, we couldn't believe it when we saw it. It's wee surreal moments like that because you've got such a close relationship with an institution like Rangers. See, if you were to talk to me about if I was doing this when I was part of the Supporters Trust 20 years ago, you'd have a working relationship with the club, I would not have believed you. It's really fortunate for us to have come on so much. And
really interesting hearing that, Cammy, and talking about the diverse arrangements. I mean, the four of us, we're friends, and we'll travel to sport and football together, and we've done a few trips. I think we started off with a few initial trips up to Dingwall for county games, which usually involved the last train home. We watch any sport. We've done a few international trips, mostly the Netherlands, go and watch football that we've done the last 2 or 3 years. Obviously, we got in last year just before the end of it, but we decided to sort of kick off the sort of podcasting over the lockdown. We've been to baseball together. We're into sort of different sports, so we thought, we'll give that a go as football fans. Then talking about baseball, but what we then felt going forward is it would be good to look at different stuff. So like our ground hopping, whilst we've all got our own teams, we've done a lot of different journeys and a lot of different trips. So we thought we'll then look at doing sort of series of ground hopping stuff. So that's what we were interested. Obviously, with your experience then as a Rangers fan, it would be good to talk through some of your favourite, most memorable trips. Not always necessarily the best result. What What trips would feature in your Rangers history as your best?
I'd like to pretend, and you'll forgive me for this, but I think you can probably understand it. It's probably been a lot of trips that I only remember certain parts of. I think we can all
understand that.
Yeah, we can all appreciate that. I think one of my favourite ones. So I'm a huge believer, a huge advocate that it's for Rangers fans. You have to go and watch Rangers away in Europe at least once in your life. And I've done the buses to Germany. I've done the buses to the bottom end of France and stuff. Went across to Belgium. Yeah, been on some kind of major journeys. Been in a couple that might have left Annie Miller's and worse for wear by the time they even got on the bus, much less anything else. But like I say, it's a big part of that. One in particular I remember was when we played Porto, and it was the 1-1 draw, the Ross McCormack equaliser. Porto had not long done a lot of kind of stadium redevelopment at that point, but I have a friend, Tommy. Tommy can sniff out a travel bargain at 100 yards. So he'll find the cheapest flight and probably the most awkward journey you can kind of come into. So you can get the direct flights, which will cost you a fortune, but Tommy will find you an alternate route and it will cost you 20 quid. We flew into Lisbon. We got the taxi to the kind of main rail station. When we were coming out the train station, you kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's still the same or not, but in Lisbon, it was like the kind of the railway station was in the kind of bottom level, but as sometimes you get with kind of a lot of European capitals, there's like a shopping centre above it, and then like a supermarket and stuff. It's like multi-level almost. So we said, we'll go and get some Superboc for the train. We get into the supermarket and we're all wearing tops and colours. I think I was still wearing a flag for whatever reason. I mean, it's essential travel on a plane. We were walking around the supermarket and this guy who's stacking shelves watching us, and he goes, "Are you Glasgow Rangers? Are you Glasgow Rangers?" And we're like, yeah. I am Lisbon. I hate Porto. Now this guy is like, he's a worker in the supermarket. And then some other person who I assume was his boss, this woman walks around the corner and she's like, whatever his name is, get back to work in fluent Portuguese. And he goes, Rangers beat Porto, Rangers. And he's standing having this quite open exchange. And we're all like looking at each other like, what the hell is going on here? And she goes, no, Porto will beat you. And I'm like, you beat Porto. You come back when you beat Porto. I give you free beer, as much free beer as you want. And I'm just like, is this what this is going to be like? We're all absolutely chuckling ourselves away laughing and stuff as well. So we head off and we're handshakes and high fives with the guy and stuff. And the woman was really nice. We're talking away. So we jump on the train. For anyone who's done this journey, when you jump on the train, Porto is kind of like, it's almost slightly coastal, but you have to go over a train. It's almost like the Tyne Weir Bridge. It kind of looks very much like that. And as you were coming round, you kind of come round the curve and you see the bridge first, and there was a massive Union flag hanging off the bridge. And then as you come round the kind of, I want to call it the caverns, but you kind of know what I mean, is that it kind of opens up a bit and then you start to see actually into Porto itself. It was blue. And I mean, blue. It was kind of like the first experience I've had where, that aerial shot of Manchester where all it is just blue bodies. It's all you can see across it. That's what Porto was like. So we get there and we get into the hotel, which is the worst hotel I think exists. It was terrible. I genuinely think, I could have paid for it for a £5 for about 3 of our rooms.
There's Tommy coming up trumps there.
Oh, honestly, what a lifesaver. But we dump the bags because that's all it's interested in, and we head straight out and stuff. And it's just a party. It just is a huge party. The amount of people that I made friends with on European trips, I still keep in contact now. And then you get, you jump on their kind of overground rail train system out to, and it has a dedicated own station. It's kind of like Ibrox, except when you come up the subway stairs and you kind of come out through the kind of underground, you then come out into the stadium, and the stadium itself is just it's magnificent. It really, really is huge. An early trip for me, but that's when I got the total bug. That's when I just loved being able to try and go away and being able to do it. Going across to Molde in Norway and having to get ferries to the game. You just wouldn't expect things like that. Being in Germany and then having to get a random taxi driver to take you back to your hotel because you can barely speak English and you certainly can't speak German. So he'll, try and get you into the right way. And what I've always found is that there's always a really good community of football, if that makes sense, to a lot of the places that we go to. And you can see these people, like, we always go, I always believe that whenever we go, we always behave ourselves. We always go with good graces and stuff. And when you see people, I remember going across when we played Tel Aviv, and we thought Tel Aviv might be a bit kind of dodgy. We were only going to be able to get direct flights there by the club and sport options. And the big thing for us was, get there, behave yourselves, etc. I was the secretary of the Rangers Supporters Trust at the time. And we had to kind of go out with the message of, look, if you're travelling, best behaviour, these people don't, there's no pissing about or what have you. Which is a message I remembered when I was in my shorts, virtually naked, pouring washing powder into a fountain, police were just driving by us and just absolutely, they were loving it. They absolutely loved it. They just loved the idea of people coming over really for a party. It was really nice to kind of go over. Israel's absolutely beautiful, but it's one of these places you never would have gone on holiday. Like, you wouldn't ever think about it. But I would go back to Israel in a heartbeat. It was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. And the people were fantastic as well.
What was your first experience then, Cammy? You mentioned that, I think you're right, everyone should do at least one European away trip in their life. But can you remember what your first one was?
No, is the honest answer. Possibly Auxerre or Ossis. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at the dates. I'm absolutely terrible with Rangers history. I really am. But it was the bus. You know, we'll jump in the bus. It's always a great idea. It left the wee Rangers club. There was a guy who I remember travelling with, didn't realise it wasn't a dry bus because he was used to getting his supporters bus all the time. We all came in with our carryouts. I was still young and foolish back then, so I used to drink cans of Tennent's. So I'd have cans of Tennent's kind of stocked up there, and we're all ready to go, and we've got our cargo to kind of take us down to at least Dover. Alan went away off, didn't realise that you could go and get a carry-out, so he ran to Asda. But by this point, he gives me his bag, and now his bag is a poly bag, like a carrier bag, with I think one set of pants, one set of socks, maybe a t-shirt, who knows. But he just literally hands it to me. The bus turns up and he's not there, and we don't know what to do. So I've got his his stuff. And we look back and all you see is him running down the road, coming over the kind of bridge at the wee Rangers Club, as he's running down the road with a shopping trolley full of beers. And he literally bought us all a pack of beer each. And he said, "Oh, thanks, boys, that's good. I'll sit with you." The guy's the size of a small bungalow. He's huge. We all very quickly, the smart ones, because I think it was our friend Russell's first trip, he got landed with him. He's one of these guys, he kind of leans on you when he's sleeping and all that kind of stuff. Leaning on Russell is a wee small cushion for most of the trip all the way down there.
My first trip had a sort of similar, first European away trip had a sort of similar theme. And coming down from the Highlands, I booked with the Kinning Park Rangers Supporters Club to meet at the Grapes Bar, sort of 8 in the morning. And it was away to Bohemians of Dublin, which was at 84, I think. Fair element of naivety for the wee lads from the Highlands coming down. But I remember the off-licence, there was an off-licence near the Grapes, and it opened up. And I remember saying to the guys, "Well, you're not allowed booze on the bus."
You were given an education.
Try and go and do it. And then, so we all get a car out and we're sitting on the bus, and the bus convener stands up and says, "You're not allowed, as we know, you're not allowed alcohol on the bus." And I'm thinking, I just told everybody that. He said, "So we're chucking a fiver in for the driver. If everybody puts a fiver in for the driver, we'll be fine."
I'm sure when we did the Auxerre game, I think we left on the Tuesday for the Thursday game. It was the same night that lot had played Man United in the Nakamura free kick. The way how we had to kind of go into it, I think that the motorway turn on were closed. So we were obviously trying to get onto the M74 as you're going through Glasgow, and you've kind of got to go through the kind of back end of Brigton and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually you go through Parkhead, and the bus convener Barry stands up and he says, "Look, there's no getting away with this. We're going to have to go through Parkhead. Everybody close the curtains over. And what I'm telling you now is if there's any damage to the bus, we're going straight back and the trip's over." So we're kind of going through, and they're all now starting to kind of come out the stadium. It was the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe we actually got away with this. And we're almost through, and we get through the streets just past where the Turnstiles pub is. And we get through that junction, and then one of the boys at the back, who, like I said, was getting ready for this departure at 9 o'clock by starting drinking probably at 12 o'clock that afternoon, just stands up and rattles the back window of the bus. Came out with some less than friendly language, shall we say. Cans, bricks, everything at the bus. The driver just floored it so we could get along London Road as quickly as we possibly could. That's what happens. That's European trips, Jimmy. You've got to enjoy them.
A trip that wasn't quite so far, but was obviously pretty momentous, was Manchester in 2008. Cammy, what was your experience there?
I was one of the fortunate ones that I got a ticket in the third ballot, and I remember going on to follow at the time. All that was happening at that point was Zenit have returned more tickets. And you're kind of hoping and praying. And back then, bizarre as it sounds for anyone listening to this nowadays, but back then your notification was a letter through the door with a ticket. That was it. That's how you got it. You didn't get an email, you didn't get anything else. And so you're praying that it's happening and stuff. So I'd already, before I got the ticket, decided that we're going. I think most people did. And as I say, we were still dealing with a lot of stuff with the Club Deck Loyal at the time. My friend George had arranged a 56-seater, so we were going down and we were coming back up in the same day and all that kind of thing. All I remember really when you're travelling south, pretty much as soon as you kind of came out of Glasgow, every motorway overpass, the bridges, whether there were traffic or pedestrian footways, every single one of them had flags on them. And it was just like that all the way down, virtually. Bus got lost in Manchester. Don't know how we did that. But there was a point where we were tail locked. We were grid locked in the motorway. I think it was kind of near Carlisle or whatever. And there was a group of guys in a minibus, and we were wearing polo shirts. We were wearing Club Deck polo shirts at the time. And this guy shouted through the bus driver window. He goes, "Your polo shirts, mate, they're absolutely brilliant. Have you got any spares?" And then at that point, George grabbed one from a bag that we had and then ran over and gave it as I say, ran across the motorway to the kind of outside lane to the inside lane to give this guy a spare polo shirt. And I was like, that would only happen in a Rangers-related away game, and we're going down to the biggest. I had a brilliant time down in Manchester, and as I say, I've never watched the game since, but the memories of that day and seeing all my pals and bumping into people, and it was like there was just this big massive convention, so you knew you were going to bump into people that you hadn't seen in years and years and years, but what a party and what an atmosphere. It was the same thing as I kind of mentioned before when we were in Piccadilly. There was an office block next to it. There was a Tesco's or some sort of supermarket that was right at the bottom, and that had sold out of booze very early doors. The office block that was above it, you could just see these windows, like kind of large floor-to-ceiling windows, which obviously were for the aesthetic purposes. They were wall-to-wall with people from the offices just looking to see what we were doing. The funny thing, right, and I'll tell you this is a true story, because as I say, we were involved, the RST at that time was involved with supporters communications. So the idea was the club and the police were going to talk to us and say, you know, if you know, we need you to send the comms out. So like I say, don't travel. You know, if you're going to travel, behave yourself, stick to these particular areas, don't go off on your own. When we got to the quarterfinals, we had a conversation with the police. Greater Manchester police came up to Ibrox, but they were visiting all of the remaining semi-finalists at that point, and they had said, so the first thing was this Manchester copper is standing there, and it's me, and I think Mark Dingwall was there, whoever was head of security at that time at Rangers, I don't know if it was Lawrence McIntyre. This copper stands up and he says, right, if in the event that you get to the final in Manchester, we're going to ask you all to encourage people without tickets not to travel. And Mark and I burst out laughing. And I don't think this guy understood our reaction. And he was like, so, sorry, what's the problem? We've got a fan zone set up that will contain 20,000 people, and there's going to be 20 toilets. And I was like, you'll need about 4 times that. I mean, I don't think you understand what this, but I was kind of saying this to him as a kind of a confident, well, not confident, but a kind of a precursor, but I wasn't that confident because I didn't think we would beat Fiorentina. You all know yourselves. I mean, as soon as that happened and Nacho's penalty goes in, everybody, we're going. That's it. Everybody's going. Whether you're flying down, getting the train down, driving down, walking down, doesn't matter. Everybody's going. It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic.
I was at our supporters bus. At the time, I worked down in Manchester. I was in secondment down there, so I told everyone, listen, we'll go to Albert Square.
Yeah.
And that just worked out absolutely perfect. But our supporters bus, we stayed down at Albert Docks through in Liverpool, and we took the option, let's get a minibus kind of through in the day, and then at night just kind of come back. And do you know what, a few of us had tickets, a few didn't. Those of us that didn't went to Albert Square, had just the best time, the best day. It was incredible. Went back to the hotel at night through in Liverpool and woke up the next day to all this stuff in the papers, and we thought, didn't see a single thing the whole day. Like you said, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people down there, tens of thousands. Every shop sold out of anything that was remotely alcohol related at all. Again, what an experience, what a day. It was, like you said, on the way down, it was like a convoy.
Yeah.
It was just everything, red, white and blue, the whole way down. You really, you feel part of something when you see something like that. It's great.
It's funny you're kind of saying that, because when Adam Thornton and James Forrest from the podcast, we went across to Luxembourg to play Progress in what I think was arguably one of the worst games of football I've ever seen in my entire life, as a 0-0 draw, which was totally unnecessary. So Adam and I get over there, and James was kind of falling behind us. He was kind of getting changed in the room and stuff. So we get there. We found the only shop that was selling alcohol that wasn't a bit of a trek to the supermarket literally was being emptied, as people were like, if a crate of beer cost €10, to save you queuing up, you just gave the guy €20. I bought a bottle of vodka. That's a lie. I bought 2 bottles of vodka, but it came in plastic covering, like kids' toys. It was so weird. The only drink you could get your hands on. And the woman who owned the shop was literally just doing ferry runs between her shop and the supermarket to buy more drink to bring it back to her shop to sell it, because she just had queues and queues of beer standing outside the place. And yeah, we emptied it. Absolutely emptied it. But again, another brilliant trip, even though the football wasn't great.
I mean, I was wondering where kind of the furthest was that your Rangers kind of fandom is taking you. I was thinking about, I don't know if you've ever done any of the North American Rangers Supporters Associations, Toronto or anything like that. Have you ever been?
No, I haven't. And I had the opportunity recently to speak to Gary Gillan, and because I know that we've obviously had to cancel a couple of last NASA conventions, I do have my sights set on being able to try and go to Vegas next year. I'm trying to do it without the wife finding out about it. That might be difficult. We get married in Las Vegas and she's been choking to go back. And somewhat ironically, we were booked to go back to Vegas last year just before COVID hit and Trump closed the borders. That's going to be a tough needle to thread, but I'm choking to do it. I absolutely can't wait to be able to try and go and do it. And, having had the opportunity to kind of, see Rangers abroad and spending time with Rangers fans abroad, I've got zero doubt that you would go and it would be a phenomenal time. Ian Hogg's been to the last one in Vegas. I've been talking to him about us going over together. I don't know if he's got out the doghouse from the last convention. You know what it's like. You've got to time your runs with your partners, maybe get them some presents or something like that, and then just drop it in there as a casual conversation. If you say it to her when she's asleep, technically you've told her. I mean, she might not have been conscious during it, but you've told her. So it can't be a surprise when you walk out with your suitcase.
Not for a live event, but or it was live, but not in the person. But we did our golf trip to California, so we were there for a week. And we had one day off. The day off was in San Francisco. Rangers were playing Ayr United in the League Cup that day. So it would have been an 9 hour time difference. But anyway, we got up the hotel. It was an hour and a half drive. This one day in your life, you're going to be in San Francisco. What do we do? We go to the San Francisco Rangers Supporters Club. We order pizza. And we sit there eating pizza for breakfast, drinking beers, watching Rangers play Ayr United in the League Cup. You thought, is there anything else to see in this city?
yeah, that's it. I mean, we're there. It's funny you say that as well, because when I was saying there about we get married in Vegas, we did a thing where there was 4 of us travelling. So it was myself, my wife, her sister, and her sister's partner at the time. And we flew directly to Vegas from Glasgow. And then we got married. We were a few days in Vegas, got married in Vegas. And then we were going to New York on the way back, and then we're flying back. My wife's a brilliant organiser, and I'm inherently lazy when it comes to these kind of things, so I just leave her. I'll leave it to the expert. It's probably the best way I can put it. So she tells me, and she was telling me this, and I'm feigning an interest. Is probably the nicest way I can say it. I'm keeping my voice down in case she hears me. But I understand what we're doing. She's like, right, we fly over on this day, and then we're in Vegas for a couple of days. I said, right, when are we going to New York? And she goes, well, we'll probably go on the Friday. I went, okay, so we'll be in New York for the Saturday, Sunday, and then we're kind of home on the Tuesday. She goes, yeah. I went, right, the weekend is the weekend of the League Cup semi-final against Motherwell. I need to see that game. And she goes, well, where on earth in New York are you going to go and watch a game of football? What time will it be on it? I went, well, it'll be a 12:30 kickoff, so it'll be ready. I'll be about 6 o'clock New York time, and I've already found a bar called the Big Apple Bears, and I've already messaged them, and I've already confirmed that they're showing it. And of that one small piece of my whole wedding situation was the only part I was proactively involved in. And she was like, so what are we supposed to do? Because our sister's man was a Hibs fan, and he was just going to come with me just to probably get a beer. And I said, what are we supposed to do? And I went, you're in New York, a stone's throw away from Times Square. I'm sure you could entertain yourself for a few hours. And sure enough, 5 o'clock in the morning, had to get up, get a taxi, find the bar, get in there and stuff, and you pay your kind of $10 cover and all that kind of stuff. But it was absolutely fantastic. But that was it was happening. I mean, she realised what she was marrying into.
I did finish off my San Francisco trip by going to see the Giants, the baseball that evening.
Oh, yeah.
So we saw the Giants and the Padres. The Padres won. So it was good you can then add into my cultural experience there then as well. So
fantastic.
Cammy, do you like other sports? Obviously, because here we're kind of big football fans as well, obviously baseball, but we like a variety of sports. What about yourself? Is there anything else you follow?
So I like basketball. I used to play basketball when I was at school, and we kind of did quite well within our kind of local region in terms of playing in basketball tournaments and stuff with the schools. And I've always liked it. Again, kind of coming back to that New York trip, we went to Madison Square Garden, and it was the opening game of the season. I think the Knicks lost. I forget who they were playing. I've still got the ticket, but it was brilliant. But I think, as we've kind of talked about, it's kind of that experience of being able to go. And I'm not one of these people, like I know a lot of guys are like, I don't like the American, like I don't like the big showbiz glam type idea of when you're trying to do sporting events and stuff. Actually, I really like it. I really like the whole, you're there for the whole thing. It's not just the game. I liked golf when I was younger and stuff, and I'll still kind of watch a bit of that. And I'm also a bit of a kind of snooker fan. I don't know, I would have people that I know that would argue snooker isn't a sport, but I think by and large, I'll always try something, if that makes sense. If I can kind of get a bit of a grip of what's going on, and if I understand it, then I'll always give something a try, except cricket. Just can't try cricket.
We've got a Yorkshireman. We've got a Yorkshireman in the podcast. Calm down, Cammy.
I'd love to be able to get into it, because for me it looks like a great day out.
Because back in the day, it was the only place where you could get a drink all
day.
Yeah,
absolutely. Doing all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and my stepdad, big cricket fan and stuff, and he was always like, when we're kind of growing up, he goes, when you turn 18, we'll go and we'll watch it and stuff. And I was like, I'd love to, but I don't get it. I don't follow it. And people have tried to explain it to me, and I'm kind of like, this is not sticking. I don't
a T20 game might be a good introduction.
Yeah.
Where there is a bit of razzmatazz sort of English style. But yeah, that can be pretty good.
We had a brilliant day. I don't know if you'll remember it, but we used to do the Football and Masters, which was like a Sky Sports based sponsored tournament. Used to have it at the Braehead Arena, and again, Alan, I'm sure you'll remember this as well, certainly, but kind of basically reminiscent of the 10 and 6s. And I remember doing that and didn't realise you could drink at it. We got there quite early doors, and we just managed to kind of fill our boots full of a beer, and as kids kind of run about the place, and you're just sitting tanking beers as quickly as you possibly can. But that was brilliant as well. But nah, I'm primarily football. I'll usually watch if there's something on. I'll kind of stick on. I really just enjoy kind of going to the live events. I like going to gigs and stuff as well. So I'm a big fan of kind of going in and immersing myself in the experience. I loved going to Madison Square Garden and being able to try and get involved in some of that stuff as well. We spoke about it actually, I think Vegas have got is it the Vegas Knights that they've got as a football team? They were building the stadium, I think. They were kind of beginning the franchise as I was there last time, and we kind of talked about if we go back, we might go and see what's going on. Not knowing what's going on, but listen, if there's food and beer, you can't really go wrong, can you?
I think they've got a hockey team.
Yeah.
Imagine the carnage. I'm just thinking the carnage now if somebody introduced the 10 and 6s every January.
I'd love to come. But the idea of playing I just think people would find it so alien of playing your first team players in a throwaway football 5-a-side. Like a tournament for no reason, as they're probably leaving one on you as you're shielding the ball at the board or something.
I bet you see, against other teams that might have an interest in trying to beat you in the league and stuff. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah,
I feel like 10 and 6s. Remember, Hibs won that tournament when Gordon was playing. He was interviewed afterwards. And I'm sure it was him that says, that was qualified for Europe now.
That's it. I'd love to. I don't know if it ever does come back. I'd love to see Alan McGregor playing in goals for it, because if these games end up like 7-6 or whatever, and he concedes 6 goals or what have you, he'll be absolutely fizzing. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, it'd be good entertainment nonetheless.
It was good fun, that tournament.
Yeah,
it was. There was always somebody who you didn't really rate in the proper 11-a-side team, and they'd actually turn out to be totally shit hot in the 6-a-side. So every team had one.
Scott Nisbet in the Masters, in the more recent one, the Sky Sports one, scored probably one of the best goals I've ever seen in the flesh. And obviously people immediately went back to the Scott Nisbet flukery, when he was scoring in the kind of proper games. But he scored this wonderful volley in this Masters tournament, and he's kind of just looked at the camera like, you probably didn't know I had that, but I have. And it's just great,
Yeah, that Bruges game was
exactly, yeah.
Look back now, it was quite odd. I lived in Edinburgh at the time Scott Nisbet played for Rangers, and he would quite often be on the same train back home as us. And you sort of think, yeah, there's a guy playing for Rangers actually sitting behind you or beside you on the train going home.
Like a common guy like me.
Yeah. Changed times, isn't it? It's not that long ago, but I know what you mean, Alan. Now they're all fancy motors, etc. I don't think you'll catch many of them in the train.
No. It's maybe the other thing I was going to say about that Bruges game, maybe slightly unfair mentioning it, but between the 4 of us, we were represented at both of the Rangers Leeds games.
Oh, right, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
Or for 50% of us anyway. For Dave's
yes, when you were talking about European aways, I suddenly realised I have actually seen
Rangers in Europe,
a big European game. I was at the Ellen Road for the second leg in 92?
92, 93,
92. Yeah. And I think if you remember rightly, away fans were banned from going. I'm not even sure. Certainly the first game wasn't shown live on TV in Scotland either, was it? And of course, our Leeds United fan from Leeds originally. I think you had to go down to the borders for the first game to watch.
I remember you doing that.
Yeah. And we went to Bigger. Of course, Leeds scored in the first minute. I had to suppress any look of joy because it was absolutely mob. But in the second game, I managed to get a ticket. And of course, the opposite happened in the first minute. I was right in line with Mark Haitley when I thought he's going to shoot here. But unfortunately, John Lukic wasn't thinking that. And of course it flew in, and there was 2 guys in front of us. Obvious Rangers fan just went up, cheered. I was in the West End, which is the main stand at Ellen Road, where you get relatively normal football fans in there. And it was a few seconds, and after a while, somebody shouted, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here." And eventually a steward, they're all going like that. I had no problem with them, obviously. So we had to go up there. So there was plenty of Leeds fans in Ibrox that got chucked out. So eventually they got, after a few seconds, they got thrown out from the game, one of the biggest games of their lives. It was a pretty, I have to say, it's nearly 30 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a great story.
Absolutely fantastic performance from Rangers, and I can still see that second goal unfolding. Fantastic break, wasn't it? Was it Haley?
Haley across the McCoy.
Yeah, mate mine was in the Cop, and he said there was like 8,000 or how many people in the Cop were pointing somebody Mark McCoy. Of course, nobody did, and that was it too.
There's a brilliant story that Andy Gorham tells about, they were doing the build-up for that return leg of the Battle of Britain. He obviously, Rangers scored so early doors, and it was just silent because obviously nobody expected it. And he said that the only noise he heard was like this dull thud that was being made, like this kind of banging thud type noise. And he looked up and there was people in the corporate boxes going crazy because it was the Rangers fans who had bought corporate hospitality to be able to get in, and they're all banging the windows and all of that kind of stuff as well because, as I say, they're all going absolutely crazy. And so I think a few of them get ejected out the back of it and stuff. He said that was the only noise he could hear because Ellen Road was like, stunned,
He had a fantastic, probably the best goalkeeper I've seen on a regular basis, and he was pretty good that night. And funnily enough, if you remember back, although Rangers scored very early on, I've never seen the full game since, but Eric Cantona was still playing for Leeds. I have a feeling that
pulls a few good saves off from Cantona as well. Yeah.
Looking back, that must rank as one of Rangers' best teams. That I would certainly rate it as high as anything. And that season, they could quite easily have won the.
Yeah, there's a big thing around that, the kind of idea, that 92-93 team, and the kind of analogy we always use whenever we talk about, especially in pods actually, when we talk about, the treble winners and we talk about the calibre of that team, is that team could fight. So if you wanted to come and you wanted to have a bit of kind of, probably what we'd see now is football's very sanitary, if you were to show some of the tackles that we got away with back then, they could do that if that's how you wanted to play, or they could play football. So however you wanted to come and present yourself, they could match it.
McCall was pretty combative, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was really up for that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
The odd thing about that campaign is I remember the first game in the league was at home to Marseille, 2-0 down, and it was 2-0 going on 4-5-0, and then McSwiggan and Haitley scored for Rangers to get a 2-2 draw, and you're just sort of thinking that it's astonishing that we've got out of here with a result, but they just grew from that then as well in that tournament.
That team didn't know when it was beaten.
Yeah.
It just constantly fought to be able to try and make sure they made a kind of show themselves. And I know that, like you say, there's another story, I'm sure we've all heard it, about the whole, they came into training one day in between the two legs of the Leeds games. There was newspaper clippings all the way around the Ibrox, the home dressing room, because the players used to come in and change there if they were going away elsewhere to go and train. It was all newspaper clippings that Archie Knox had collated, where it was literally, that they're already looking, Leeds are already looking to the next round, they're already looking past the Rangers game and all that kind of stuff. And he did it purposely as a motivation. We spoke to him about it when we interviewed him, and he goes, it's true, I did it. And because I knew that the boys would see it and I'd get the reaction out of them that I wanted and stuff as well. Yeah.
I was going to ask you there, we talked about McCoist and Haitley in that context, obviously two of the greatest Rangers strikers of the past 30 years, but this current Rangers team is obviously going to win the league and possibly set some records doing so, but their style of play, what kind of strikers from the past few decades in your time do you think would have particularly kind of prospered in this team? I'm thinking obviously you get Tav and Barisic thrown in, great quality from the wings. If there was a certain player from the past you think would really run amok?
As you kind of mentioned there, excuse me, I think, if you talk about McCoist and Haitley, if we were to play that, I almost feel that, Haitley would get on the end of plenty of service. One thing you can always say about Mark Haitley is that he could header a ball. I think Ali being able to try and be in and around the box and being able to try and find the space similar to how Kamar Roof does it at the moment, and being able to try and pull defenders with him. And listen, McCoist, we've seen it often enough. We can all remember it at the time, and we've seen it since. But he was always a nuisance. He was always the thing he had was a predatory instinct, that he always was able to be able to find the right space to be in at the right time to be able to try and finish it. I think it'd be interesting. I'd like to see Nikica Jelavic playing in this team, because I think Jelavic gets rightly a lot of praise for the fact that he was a very, very intelligent footballer, but a huge attacking threat as well, in terms of being able to really attack the ball. Sometimes it's difficult because you get players who are waiting for the ball to come to them, but he'll absolutely go and meet the cross and meet it with ferocity as well. I think if we kind of go a bit further back than that, Chris Boyd would be kind of interesting, although I don't know if Boyd is going to be able to kind of do the level of work that central striker has to do for us at the moment. Not necessarily overlaying Boyd's kind of makeup and stuff. But again, I still think it's Chris Boyd. He's going to be able to score goals. I mean, if you can give him half a chance, he'll sniff it out. It would be interesting. It's a great question. I kind of grew up on football partnerships for strikers. McCoist and Hateley's the most obvious one, but then if you look down south and you think of guys like York and Cole at Man United, Sutton and Shearer at Blackburn, all of these kind of big teams, you always think of two strikers, and you've got the big guy, the wee guy, or whatever. It's really basic, but listen, it worked for a hell of a lot of teams.
I've maybe got a few years on you, Cammy, but down south, Dalglish and Rush was another classic combination of that kind of era as well. Alan or Dave Jr., any strikers from the recent past or even the further past that you'd like to have seen in this Rangers team?
Do you know, Richard, it's a really good question. I hadn't thought of it before. I don't know why he's the first name coming to mind, but I think Gordon Durie would have done cracking in a Stevie Gerrard team. He would have worked absolutely in that front three really well. I know you maybe get other workers in there like Rod Wallace and so on, but I think Gordon Durie would have done pretty well.
He was underrated as a Rangers player, actually. Alan, anybody you'd like to throw into the mix?
It's a good question, because I think sort of similar to what Cammy was saying. I'm probably a bit of a traditionalist there, thinking you're going to have two guys, a big guy and a weer guy finding the space in the box. So and I guess that's the first, not quite the first, but this was the McCoist-Hateley thing was the first big partnership I then saw as a Rangers team winning things. It's interesting because they were supplied by a winger. So what you're effectively saying now is your Tav and Barisic, they're fullbacks. So you potentially have that space with a couple of players like that. I mean, Rangers, you're not necessarily with Roof and Kent and Hadji going to find guys jumping about to try and win the ball in the air. But you could with McCoist and Hateley. McCoist, I think Yorkshire Dave pointed this out before, McCoist actually reasonable in the air as well. It was a bit understated, probably because he had other players who were then the likes of Hateley beside him who would take all the credit for scoring the headers. But McCoist wasn't really a slouch there as well. So no, interesting work ethic. Hateley had a great work ethic as well. I mean, any player you look at in that type of winning team has to have a great work ethic. I mean, you can then, people will always look back and say, oh, he was a wee bit on the lazy side, but that tends not to be the situation. So,
what about Marco Negri, to throw a name in? How many would he score in this Rangers team?
I was going to say Big Dado. I think there's just about any Rangers team. Big Dado, if he wouldn't add to the first team, he would be no bad to take off the bench as well.
I think if we talked about, obviously, that Hateley-McCoist partnership, Hoggy, his dad, makes a big comparison between Kemar Roof and Maurice Johnson, which I think is quite interesting. When you talk about, Johnson was like the third element of that McCoist-Hateley partnership, and, he was kind of brought in with a view to potentially McCoist, at that time, not playing as regularly. I think it'd be interesting to see, because, again, say what you will about Maurice Johnson, but he had a tremendous work ethic, and he continued to, as I say, make sure that he was covering a lot of kind of different areas of the box and kept moving.
You're a big Kyle Lafferty fan, Cammy, but you never mentioned him there.
Oh, no, I know. Listen, I've got too much respect for your podcast to be able to decry it by suggesting that Kyle Lafferty would have been able to slot right into that team there as well. But listen, all I can tell you is, I'm still recovering from a broken heart after he signed for Kilmarnock, and Rangers haven't been able to try and pursue him. I mean, the guy wins titles, that's a fact. And he wins titles around about this kind of time as well. So he'd be the guy we'd all be looking to get us over the line,
It sounds like Kyle Lafferty would run a very close second to my next question then, Cammy, but all-time favourite Ranger for yourself?
McCoist, 100%, Ali McCoist. I understand people's opinion will have changed because obviously the whole, the manager remit and, stuff off the field and various other wee bits and bobs. Ali McCoist scores goals. It's that simple. When you're my age and you were growing up, everybody was Ali McCoist. That's who you played to be. Some of your greatest memories in terms of when you think about Rangers celebrations. My favourite all-time Rangers image is the 98 Scottish Cup semi-final when McCoist has poked home the header in a game that Celtic were battering us in. And we had very few chances, and up comes Ali McCoist with a header. And he's on his knees and Richard Gough is behind him and stuff as well. That's one of my all-time favourite images because it's Ali McCoy scoring what was... So no, it's Super Ali, boyhood hero. And I've met him once. I met him once when I was at 10 and he was out on a date with a girl. Don't be too shocked. And he was in the... I think we were in a pub and he was in the restaurant next door and somebody had said, Super Ali's in there. and I went and got his autograph and stuff. But I'm choking to see if I can get him in to do something with the podcast. He's just a brilliant guy, just a brilliant character, and everyone resonates with him. And
the reference I was going to make probably ages me as well, but it was like a real life Roy of the Rovers, in that like he was like the comic book character where he'd score a hat-trick in the cup final against Celtic.
Yeah.
He'd come back and score a last-minute winner when he's just get back from injury. He'd score that overhead kick. I mean, the volume of goals was incredible, but just the importance of them, he seemed like a guy who Rangers could and did always depend on when he needed a goal most. And I think some Rangers fans would give him a harder time because of the management, but he'd have to have done a lot worse and more damage as a manager, to me, to even start making a dent in what he achieved for Rangers as a player.
I think the problem is that you'll look through it through that optic, and you'll look at, when it was doing the stuff in terms of who he was backing within the board and all the rest of it and stuff. Tell me someone who didn't make big mistakes when we're talking about some of the spivs that were involved within some of that time, and who he was kind of putting his money on in terms of being able to try and come into it, because the club was a complete shambles. And this is a guy who, by and large, had been paid very, very well by Rangers, was very important to Rangers, had been through so many changes at the club, but the kind of constant was that, guys like David Murray were always going to be there and stuff, and been able to put so much centre around him. And as you say, because of how important he was and the goals that he scored and the trophies that he won for us, I think that, his allegiances probably had to have, they were probably multifaceted. And what I mean by that is he probably cared about the fans, he cared about the players, he cared about the staff that were there, he cared about the boardroom. So you're going to offend somebody, do you know what I mean? And that's why I can understand as to why he was so conflicted in terms of where he would lend some of his backing and his support and stuff as well. It's difficult, right? We all believed in false dawns at that kind of time.
Absolutely.
I think we just have to give him that I suppose that leeway and stuff. He scores goals. That's it. That's Alan McCoist. He scores goals.
Alan and Dave Jr., what's your kind of take on McCoist's legacy?
I'm with Cammy again, sorry. But he'll always, not always, I suspect he'll retain his position as my favourite Rangers player of all time again from that era. The management thing, prefer now to look on that as Rangers needed him as a manager at that time in their history. They needed a Rangers man like that who was going to stand up for the club, lead them through it and be that figurehead. Your Pedro Caixinha and what have you, that would not have worked in that type of situation. So I know he didn't bring the glory to Ibrox at that point, but that wasn't really the point. As a player, he was a guy. I'll chuck in my unsung favourite Rangers player as well, a fullback, not quite in the same mould as we have today, but Stuart Munro, left back. Always enjoyed him. My mates used to slag me off for how much I went on about him, but I always liked the fact that you could have like an iconic player you would look back on that nobody else really was that bothered about.
Solid and reliable. I remember Stuart Munro being a total classic. Solid fullback. Dave Jr., what about yourself in terms of McCoist and the kind of the Rangers legacy?
Just when you say solid and reliable, it takes me back to the night in Rotterdam this time last year with Alan, sharing the bed with him. But anyway, you've got a full house for Supers fans, I'm afraid. Again, just growing up that generation. Nothing. He might not have been the best player we've ever had, technically, but he'll be forever my all-time favourite, my all-time hero on absolutely every level. Fantastic.
Well, I think what's really interesting when we did the poll for 50 greatest Rangers was because obviously McCoist won it. There was one voting point between him and John Gregg, and that's formidable. And I think the big thing for us, we were always really interested in seeing the result of that poll because by and large, you would always expect or associate podcasts with a young listenership, like, something like that as well. But so many of them voted for Gregg, just continued as the backup. But yeah, one point was the thinnest possible margin you could have. I
think John Gregg was the other name that you could potentially have thrown in there, but I'm probably just quite happy to say a little bit too young to have fully appreciated John Gregg in that way. My John Gregg story, though, is that he once interrupted the conversation we would have to butt in on me. It's something that I'll forever...
The perils of fame, Alan, the perils of fame. How did that happen?
There's a backstory to this as well, but I was at a charity do with Chris Cassidy, so Chris, a good Celtic man. In the auction, they had 2 tickets for the director's box at Ibrox, and Chris is a very generous guy as well, and he's sort of saying, this isn't going for that much, Alan, let's do this. So we ended up, we'd always had a few drinks, it's good charity, we bought it, we won it, we were all excited, all chuffed about it. I got up in the morning and I phoned Chris and I said, are you sure you want to do this? And he said, no, I can't tell. I can't tell my friends and my family. So I found a friend to go with, not too difficult. Myself and my mate were in there. I think it was Alloa Rangers were playing. We were talking to Campbell Ogilvie, the previous secretary of Rangers. And being from the Highlands, he was talking about when he signed Billy Ackert. So I was talking about Billy Eckert at Cali, and John Gregg walks over and says, "Oh, I was the one who signed Billy Eckert for Rangers." And you wanted to turn around and say, "Who are you? What's I'm chatting to these guys here." So that's I'm going to dine out in that one for as long as I can. John Gregg wanted to chat to me. Maybe I was going to ask Cammy as well. We've obviously covered a couple of European trips, a couple of trips in England. So favourite trips you have in Scotland? Dingwall's an acceptable answer.
I think you could say Parkhead if you come away with the result. I'll give a wee mention to my mate Simon Leslie, who I remember coming out skipping out of Parkhead. It was following the Mendes goal and the 4-2 game, and obviously Miller had scored the volley, or the kind of half volley from my personal best friend Kevin Thompson. That one, if you remember, the Boric spill. And for whatever reason, Miller took about 8 touches before he eventually put it in over it. And I remember we all came out and we're all singing and cheering and all that kind of stuff. And Simon was not a Kenny Miller fan for past misdeeds. Let's just put it like that. So Simon came out and I was standing to him and I'm hugging him, and he goes, "Don't know why everyone's celebrating a 2-2 draw."
It didn't count them.
Yeah, didn't count them. I think in terms of, I've got a few that I really dislike. Pittodrie and Tannadice been a couple of them. Kilmarnock's all right. I don't really mind the close proximity to the Park Hotel. I mean, you can actually get a beer before you go into it, and then not have to queue for ages and all the rest of it. It's just a really hospitable ground of it. Yeah, I think if I probably had to pick one, I'd probably say Fir Park. I quite like Fir Park just because I think it's quite a close ground. We've not done well recently, but another favourite of mine. Tynecastle. I think Tynecastle's got a really good atmosphere when it's going your way, but the last couple of times we've been there, it's not been fantastic. And plus, it's kind of a bit of a different day out in Edinburgh, where you can kind of go through and you can spend a good portion of the day in the city and stuff as well, and then head on down to the game, and it's not too bad. They seem to be quite stringent for whatever reason, I don't know. That they kind of go through the barriers and the security gates to be able to get there and check your tickets. I don't quite understand why, because it's Tynecastle, but yeah, I quite like that. It's good to be stadium that's just off the kind of main road and Lothian Road as well.
Have you ever sampled the joys of Dingwall, where Alan's from, Cammy?
I have, yeah, been up to Dingwall. I think it's great to be able to try and do the trips up north and stuff. Probably Inverness is probably my furthest one, I think, but Dingwall, Dingwall's good, I think, in terms of being able to try and go for a trip, but going up then when you would just want to come home quickly, it's difficult when you're in the car for the business end of kind of 4 hours, and going all kinds of manners of routes and stuff as well. But yeah, it's nice.
Enjoying listening to everything. It's quite interesting. Lisbon reminds me a lot of the first time Alan and I went to Cowdenbeath. Sounds really quite similar.
Glorious Central Park.
Yeah, that was a day and a half, that one, yeah. It was great hearing all these different grounds, and it's something that Alan and I have spoken about, along with one of our other friends, another Alan, about once everything gets going again and we can start travelling abroad, get to some of those Rangers European games away. So yeah, I think we've all done a few to different extents. I think we've almost done the tourist type ones, but we love the idea of getting across to the likes of Denmark and maybe in kind of Eastern Europe, and you always get a lot less fans. You can maybe enjoy it that bit differently, which has been our experience.
I think it was quite odd because although financially the Champions League is obviously the kind of big prize, what I always enjoyed about, back then, kind of like the UEFA Cup, Europa League as it is now, was sometimes when the big teams, sometimes it can be a bit sterile because I want to go and see us play in the Bernabeu. I'd love to be able to try and do that and stuff, but I think the Champions League, you're dealing with a kind of top tier level of teams and stuff as well, and it's kind of, whereas it's always felt a lot to me when you do the Europa League or UEFA Cup teams, it's a bit more provincial, it's a little bit more, but it's rough, but it's good, right, because it's rough and ready. Yeah. Sometimes I think there's I don't know, maybe if I'm not explaining this properly, but there's a bit more character to it, if that makes sense, because you're going in and you're going probably to places that, like you say, you wouldn't dream of kind of going to. Like I would not have went to Molde in Norway for the any other reason than to go and watch Rangers.
Where were you in Norway?
So we flew into Oslo and then we got a bus up to Molde, a ferry to Molde in terms of there as well. So yeah, that was
I just 6 or 7. I've been a couple of times to Norway, but I didn't know where Mulber was. Is it? How far up is it?
Yeah, it's pretty up kind of near the north. There was some very interesting cliffs that we drove alongside that, let's just say I was looking in the other side of the bus window because I was terrified we could have fallen down. I was like, you would never go there. I mean, you would never ever have a kind of, unless you were an extensive traveller, you would never have an overwhelming reason to go there. But it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it, Norway? I've seen one match in the Arctic Circle. It was, we just happened to be up in Tromsø, and I went up to the ground, but there was no game on. And I was speaking to a guy, and I don't know if you remember, a long time ago, Tromsø played, I think they played St. Mirren in the UEFA Cup. I was talking to a guy at the ground, and he was an ex-player. I think he was on the coaching staff, and he said he'd be playing in that game, and he says, we're actually playing in the cup in a place called Buda in a couple of days' time. I says, I think we're going to be there. To cut a long story short, we went to that game, and Tromsø were 4-0 up at half time, and the fans were going absolutely crazy. That was quite an experience. It's a great place, isn't it, Norway?
Yeah, it's beautiful, and like you say, because you get the opportunity to kind of go over there, and Mulder by and large is a town, right? I mean, I don't know if you could technically call it a city. I really don't know, but I genuinely don't think so. And again, like you say, when you descend on the place and stuff as well, and people see and you're out having a good time and all the rest of it and stuff, the kind of locals, they really don't know what to make of it, but they love it. They love being able to kind of come in and be part of it and stuff.
A bit pricey for the LBs, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm fairly sure we were able to kind of hunt out a bargain, I think, of like, you know, being able to try and find the nastiest, cheapest beer you could possibly find.
It can be done. I think
listen,
make their own.
You get a couple down your neck and they become far more palatable. You know, that's always, you've got to be open-minded with these things.
You didn't find some old cans of Skål from 1986, right?
I mean, like Harp and all that kind of stuff as well, you know, the proper stuff, you know.
Cammy, you've been really a fantastic guest, and we're really keen for our listeners to get the opportunity to learn more about Heart and Hand. So how can they keep in touch with Heart and Hand, Cammy? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. So we do 2 free shows a week, which is our flagship, which come out on a Monday, and we will normally have an extra show which will come out on a Thursday or a Friday. You'll get them wherever you normally get your podcasts, so you can get them on Spotify, Acast, iTunes, etc. Our Patreon site is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. I think, as we kind of touched on there, we've got loads of shows about Rangers and different periods of the Rangers history. We've got some stuff which is happening at the moment, which travels from the 70s, and we've got another show which is talking about Walter's second spell at the club, which is obviously within, I say, the last few years, but you kind of know what I mean. And loads of different topical shows as well. We try and do a good mix of content. I think you'll find some stuff in there that I think will hopefully appeal to your taste. And again, like you say, we're really very, very fortunate. We've got a brilliant community of people who are really supportive of us, as we've kind of worked, especially through the current climate of COVID and how people have been impacted and stuff. We've had a brilliant response to people reaching out and looking to be able to try and help others and stuff. If I can, just really quick, because you asked me about one of the big things that's an eye-opener for me as a podcast, was that last year we made the decision that when more furlough schemes and redundancies started to kind of come out and stuff, we knew that for the small part of our pod plays in people's lives, that some people were really dependent on it. So we said on one of the daily updates, we are going to continue subscriptions, but if you've been impacted, then we will refund your subscription fee for as long as you happen to be out of work or on reduced wages or whatever. You don't have to explain the context, you don't have to show us proof or nothing, crazy like that. You just have to tell us and we'll do whatever we can to help. And we kind of wanted to make sure that people were well accommodated. What actually happened was people then got in touch with us regular subscribers who said, we will take out additional subscriptions and pay for them as long as people don't feel that they have to then cancel their subscription. So give them our additional ones. Really just resonates, I think, a person-to-person perspective, a little bit more of that kind of human community. So we always want to be able to try and do whatever we can for it. Mentioned to you guys before when we were talking about doing the live show in a couple of weeks, the virtual live show. It came about because we've got a listener who always comes to our live shows whenever we do them, whether we do them in the Loudon Tavern at Ibrox or in the stadium itself. And he kind of mentioned, I'm disabled. I'm really struggling to be able to try and manage my mental health, but I can't leave the house. And I'd love to be able just to do something and get together with people to be able to do that. We never thought about that. And, I'm fortunate enough that I can go out, and if I have to go to the supermarket or, if I go to my work, if I'm ever working on site for the odd shift or whatever. But I kind of took a bit of that for granted, and this gentleman reached out to us and said, I'd like to do it. And that's why we're doing it, for that particular reason. So we're very appreciative of the feedback and the insight that we get from people, because, again, like I say, we absolutely don't ever want to take anything for granted. So I'm incredibly proud of it. Hopefully, if it helps people, then, as I say, it's just us talking nonsense about football, but it's making a difference. times.
Fantastic, and especially in these times as well. And that's it's the definition of a community, isn't it? It's somewhere where people are joined together with a common purpose, something that binds them, and they look after those who are less fortunate than themselves at times.
Yeah, and my petition to have Ross Wilson sacked from Rangers for not signing Kyle Lafferty is not gathered the momentum from that community that I wanted. However, you have to pick and choose your battles. What can I say?
Give it time, Cammy. Thank you so much, Cammy. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest, and I think our listeners will really, really enjoy that.